On this episode, we discuss our impressions of reverse culture shock after my return from a trip to Canada.
So if you've been an expat for a long time and are thinking of going back home, you'll find a lot to ponder in this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 hoping to never have to buy another winter jacket to protect against the snow. But my recent trip to Canada in April ended my long winning streak.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 21 years ago, fell in love with mango sticky rice, especially as an example of Thai soft power in the world. So I never left.
That's right, baby. On stage, I don't ride elephants to school. I am a rapper. I'm terrible at this, but
Something like that.
it's a hip reference.
We want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, David Comerford, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after we're done talking about Greg's thoughts on reverse culture shock after his trip to Canada to hear why David is our official Thailand hiking correspondent. We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, emails with behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world, and various other goodies. But best of all, patrons like David also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about Thailand dropping its PCR test requirements, my journey to the beach for a Songkran holiday, and the strange case of how and why Bangkok ambulances raced to the scene of accidents on the news that two rival ambulance gangs brawled in Bangkok last week, which resulted in one death.
Boo.
To learn how to become a patron, click the support button at the top of our website.
Right, and as always, if you have something to say or a show idea or a joke or just want to say hi, head to bangkokpodcast.com and click the little microphone button in the bottom right to leave us a voicemail that we will play on the show.
For sure.
All right, well, on this episode, we are going back to the well of reverse culture shock in the wake of my recent trip back home. Now, as you may or may not know, I recently visited my hometown of Calgary, Alberta for the first time in 14 years. It was a great trip back to see some of my old friends, but it was also kind of a strange one. As any long-term expat knows, your connection to the motherland starts to fade after a while, and the longer you're away, the less solid your connection to quote-unquote home becomes. Add to that the fact that I'm wondering if or how much my son will ever even want to connect to Canada, and what my responsibility to him in that regard is, plus the beginnings of a midlife crisis, and you have a trip back that was all about nostalgia and self-discovery. Also, lots of poutine. I had to get lots of poutine in.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And maple syrup.
Of course, yeah. Oh, God. You can't see behind me. Can you see that? Those bottles on the table behind me, Ed?
Oh, I can see it. Yeah. Actually, it's so funny. I can see the liter bottles of maple syrup.
Yeah, I brought a lot back.
So funny.
So what do you think about this, Ed? I mean, you were recently back in the States, and we did a show on your thoughts. So, have you recovered from that yet?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I was trying to compare in my head. I was trying to compare my situation to your situation. There's some similarities. Both of us had been away for a while. We went back. It was freezing. We didn't like the weather, but of course we got to connect with old friends and family, which makes the trip worthwhile. I think that, one thing, it might not have been as harsh, I think, for me. So I think in your situation, it's like your family has kind of moved away from Canada. So when you go back to where you grew up, you don't have, I mean, obviously you have friends, but you don't have family there. So I still have family back in Ohio. So when I go back, I'm seeing my mom and my sisters. And so it's like, it makes me feel like I still have a connection there. Like I'm not totally moved here. Like I've still got my root. I still got my foot in the ground in Ohio.
Right. Your foot in the ground in Ohio, foot in the grave in Thailand. So you're like,
or maybe one way or the other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then also, I've talked about this before. It's I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Cleveland, which is just middle class, right? And then when I came here to Bangkok, I do live a kind of middle class lifestyle. And I feel like there's this international culture where, it's funny. Like when I'm back home, I go to Starbucks for a nitro cold brew, and I go to Subway for the sandwich I like. And when I come to Bangkok, I go to Starbucks for a nitro cold brew, and I go to cold brew, and I go to, and
Right.
so it's like for me, it's, there's a few. It's funny. There's a few restaurants and shops like brands that we have in Cleveland that we don't have in Bangkok.
Right.
So there's some like there's some things I can do back there that I can't do here. But honestly, about 80% of the food I ate was exactly the same. It's just international.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, that's one of the things that makes Bangkok great, right? Is that you can live on street food and noodles on the side of the road for as long as you want, but also if you want a natural cold brew
you got McDonald's or Burger King.
or a box of cinnamon toast crunch from the grocery store, you can do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but it is interesting for me because my family's on the West Coast. So I went back basically as I called it my Nostalgia-thon 2022 tour because
Right.
I was going back purely to see my old friends from high school and college.
Right.
Right. So it was interesting for me because what we're going to do now on this show is I'm going to just go through 6 or 7 points that I noticed when I was there that really stood out to me as, wow, that's different. But first, like just to sum it up, it was a really odd trip for me because that was my home. It's where I grew up. It's where I sort of came into myself. That's where my personality really developed. But I didn't feel like I was home. I felt like an outsider while I was there. I felt like a tourist.
Interesting. Now, on your previous trips, are you saying you did not feel that way?
Well, the last time I was there was 14 years ago with my wife, my then girlfriend, now wife. And that trip was all about showing her around and introducing people. So I didn't really have much time to think about it.
Right.
And before was for a friend's
I didn't
wedding.
realize it had been that long since you'd gone back to Calgary.
Yeah, 14
wow.
years.
But Canada was 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, I went to the West Coast to see my mom about 4 years ago. Yeah.
Right.
But,
Okay. Yeah. So that's different. I mean, 14 years that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so it was weird, like walking around. I'm thinking, like, wow, this is where I grew up. But no offense to my friends who are listening who live in Calgary and who like it there. But man, I just comparing it with Bangkok, and of course, this may not be fair because it was freezing cold there. It was about -10 for most of my trip.
-10 Celsius. Wow.
-10 Celsius. Yeah.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's about 640 Fahrenheit. I don't know the scale, but I had to buy a new jacket, and I had to buy. I was pissed. I went for a walk off my friend's place my first day there. I'm like, I'm going to go for a walk and see what can happen. And then I got about 10 minutes out. I'm like, oh my god, I'm so cold. It's windy. My ears were freezing. So I went into a MEC, a mountain equipment company, like outdoor gear store. And I'm like, I have to buy like a toque, like a wool hat or something to pull over my head. So I'm looking around, and the cheapest one I could find, dude, was $21. It's about
For real.
Yeah, it was about 700 baht. And the kicker was it said made in Cambodia. Like
my God.
I probably could have bought it down the street for 50 cents.
Oh, that is hilarious. No, that's great.
They had me by the balls.
Well, first off, this idea of getting stuck in the cold, that exact thing happened to me where I'm just out there and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not prepared for this. I have my jacket, but I'm like, I don't have gloves. I don't have a scarf.
Right,
so
right.
I was there, man. I can relate.
Yeah. Well, I bought the heaviest jacket that I have from Thailand, which was basically like lingerie against the Canadian wind. So anyway, It was a very sort of introspective trip for me because I'm there seeing all my old friends from the 90s. I borrowed my friend's car, and he had a kind of an older car that I couldn't hook up to my phone. So I turned on the radio, and they have this brand new radio station that plays nothing but 90s. So it was just like, I'm driving around. I'm back in the day. I'm back in college. I'm bopping to Alanis Morissette and
Oh, that's funny.
But 14 years has gone by. My friends have kids who are teenagers now, and like there's a vast chasm that I just didn't experience. So I felt like an outsider. I felt like a stranger in a strange land.
Yeah, no, I can relate. I mean, I think it's inevitable just with age and time, and then what's going on in people's lives. I got to say, to be perfectly honest, when I was back in Cleveland, I did not really feel like a stranger in a strange land.
Really?
Even though most of my friends, like yours, it's like they have kids. Some of them have kids in college, and so that's weird. But that just that's not really about Thailand versus the U.S. It's just an age thing, right?
Yeah.
And
but it was
I don't know.
It was doubly weird because I felt like I didn't belong here. But then I thought, well, my home is Thailand, but I don't really belong in Thailand either. I'm not a Thai citizen. I can't speak Thai fluently.
But
so
dude,
like,
we we have created a world for ourselves here. We do belong here, Greg. We've got to cross this line where you can stand up and say, I belong here.
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me.
And gosh darn it, I belong in Thailand.
Anyway, it was a fun trip, but it got me thinking about a lot of things. So obviously the first thing I noticed that was different was the weather. And like I said, it was about -10 for most of my trip there. The day after I left, Calgary got a huge dump of snow. Like 30 centimeters of snow on the day after I left.
Oh, wow. Shit. I thought you were going to say it warmed up.
No, it got worse. So I got out of there just in time. And man, like, it was nice for a while. Like, I really enjoyed that crisp freshness in the air, but Thailand spoiled me, man. We talked about that smell of Thailand, the moist air on the bonus show. I don't think I could do another winter, man. And it wasn't even really winter. It was April.
No, I mean, again, I said this earlier, but I've definitely become weak. Like, I've just gotten used to the weather here, even though it's not perfect, because it is so damn humid. But man, it was so damn cold in Ohio that I told my buddies, like, I cannot live here.
Yeah,
I can't. I'm sorry.
Especially, it's like that for what, 4 months of the year, 5 months of the year.
Yeah, no, I just whatever. So some of my buddies were giving me shit about it, and I'm just like, guilty, like, whatever. They're like, right. You're weak, you're a wussy. I'm like, guilty, like, that's it. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm like tapping out.
I'll throw another log on the fire before I die.
So the weather, I can relate, man.
Yeah, not very pleasant. The second thing I noticed, now this will probably make a lot of people who listen to the show happy, but there was weed stores everywhere, marijuana dispensaries all over the place.
Dude, I have yet to experience this in my lifetime, and it's on my bucket list to experience like legal recreational weed. I've never experienced it. So listeners will remember that I got stuck. I went to go visit a buddy of mine in upstate New York and got stuck in a blizzard when I was back in the States. So when I crossed the border from Pennsylvania to New York, so Ohio and Pennsylvania are conservative states, but New York is super liberal. So when I crossed the border into New York, I was like, wait, is weed legal here? Like, because this is New York. I'm like, I heard that weed was legal. Yeah. And so my buddies from Ohio were like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Like is it legal? And so we stopped for food at like a fast food joint. And so I just asked the cashier, like some 17-year-old girl, I'm like, is weed legal here? Like, what's up? Like, what's it like?
You're asking the teenagers, hey, can you score me a bag?
No, but she was like,
yeah.
She was like, yeah, it's legal. And so I got back in the car and I'm like, boys, like, we got to find a dispensary. We got to, and so it turns out that in New York, recreational weed has been legalized, but private dispensaries don't open until like this coming August. So it's like, because we were going around trying to find, and we're like, wait, it's supposed to be legal here. And then we dug into the details, and it's not fully available.
Funny image. These old dudes in a car cruising around with the teenagers. Hey, can you score me some of that devil's lettuce there?
No, I thought it was legal. I'm like, finally, because unlike most of my friends, I never did the Amsterdam thing. I've never been back to Seattle or Portland, so I have yet to experience legal recreational weed.
Well, it was interesting for me because when I left Calgary, I had friends who smoked, but they were outliers, and I came from a very conservative town, and it was just not really something you saw widely. Now you go back, and every house of a friend I went over, everyone pulled out a bong, like, hey, how's it going? And they took a big hit. I'm like, I
that's
guess
hilarious.
Just how things are going now.
I have never experienced that. That's wild.
Yeah. The next thing I noticed, and this was something that you brought up in your episode, was that a lot of people looked really rough walking around town, walking down the street. I mean,
there's a lot of dudes that just look tough and rough, and it's like, I think, we talked about it on my thing, but I think there's something about Thai culture. I don't know. There's something about being proper or being clean.
Yeah.
And like being clean shaven. Like, obviously there are Thai guys who walk down the street who I might think, oh, that guy could be tough, but it's just a very different vibe. Like
right.
Like back home, you get these guys who are like they're jacked and they've got tats, or they just look like working men, and
they're wearing like kind of tatty ratty clothes, or like
Yeah.
Jeans are dragging on the back and they're dirty or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it's cold and it's hard to look stylish and suave when you're wrapped up in a
Right.
down jacket and, bundled up
Right.
against the wind. So that's a knock against them. But, the only thing I could compare it to was like, Thailand is like walking among the elves in Rivendell, where everyone is beautiful and looking nice.
You're
and
right.
then you
That's
go
right.
to
That's
Calgary
right.
and you're in like the mines of Moria with the dwarves with long beards.
The bottom
maybe
line
an
is
unfair statement.
Thai people are they're just nice and pleasant and cute and sweet, and like it's just like the way they present themselves.
It's much more elegant.
That's right. Yeah. It's like,
I don't know. I can't put my thumb on it, but just everyone
no.
here just seems prettier.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone here just looks better. And then back home, it's just like you get like Vikings, you just have like, like ripped dudes,
like me, but
yeah, right.
in
That's
Canada.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I will have to agree with this.
Now, tell me if you noticed this, but man, there was a lot of aggressive beggars in Calgary.
Interesting. So I'm actually glad you brought this up because I had a weird experience in Cleveland. So check this. I'm with my group of friends. We're going out. It's very cold. It's maybe like 9 p.m. at night. And this guy came up to us on the street, like in downtown Cleveland. And, stranger comes up to you and the way he's dressed, you think he's like a beggar. But man, he had real game. Like, I'm not sure the right word would be aggressive because he wasn't really rude. He was like super polite. And he just had a rap and, he was like, at first he's just nodding, "Hi, how are you? Are you having a good night?" "Yeah, good night." And then I remember, like I said something like, "Yeah, I'm having a good night. How about you?" Just to a stranger. And then he said, "I want to thank you for treating me like a human being."
Oh God.
And looking me in the eye. And then it led to like he had a whole, I don't know what to call it, like
Here we go. I'm getting his Herbalife pitch.
Yeah, no, but he had game. So I guess it counts as aggressive because no Thai beggar acts that way. Like they're super humble, and if like,
right. They have a cup out and they have a little sign or something like that. And every once in a while, you'll get a guy comes up to you and like puts his hand out and asks for money, but they're quiet and you almost don't even notice them. But I mean, like aggressive, like guys yelling at me, like screaming at me for money or something like that, like across the street.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, and I was at first. I'm like, I stopped. I'm like, what? What are you? Do I know you? What are you yelling at? And he's just like, and
this is in Calgary.
Yeah, and these guys are obviously homeless. They look really rough and dirty and stuff. But you just don't get that in Thailand. And I was really unprepared for it. Just walking down the street and some random dude starts screaming at you.
Okay, this is something that I did not really experience in Cleveland. Yeah. Although I did experience the homeless guy with game. I did experience that.
Homeless guy with game.
No, he had a lot of game. He had a whole pitch. He had a whole story.
Like a human. Yeah, please visit my website at homelessguywithgame.com. Now, the other side of that was something I noticed, and I'm not sure you saw this with your woman in CVS that gave you like her card or something like that,
right?
Which might have been a little self-serving, but man, the cashiers and the people in parking lots and just like regular people out shopping were so friendly.
And, nice.
And like everyone was just like, you'd come up to a cashier to buy a bag of chips or something like that, and they'd be like, "Hey, how you doing today?" "Oh, I'm great. How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm all right. I did this and this and this today." "Oh, dude, yeah, like, I went down there."
It's so funny. It's like, not being Canadian, I don't think about Canadians getting along with Canadians. Like all the jokes are like how nice are Canadians compared to other people. But what if you have two Canadians and it's like super nice? It's like nice. It's like nice squared. It's like it's nice squared.
It's like a mathematical equation of niceness. Nice to the power of nice. Oh my God!
It's ultra nice.
And I remember I was walking to the Safeway to get some groceries, and there was one woman who was walking on the other side of the parking lot, like the aisle, the street, whatever. And she had a couple of bags and was kind of awkwardly carrying them. And some other woman, just random woman in the parking lot, was like, "Do you need help over there?"
Oh wow!
And she's like, "Oh no, I got it. Thanks so much." And she's like, "Okay, have a good weekend now."
Oh, that's great. Okay, yeah. So I'm sure. Okay, so this is our problem. So certainly a chunk of that is just purely Canadian.
I think
it wouldn't happen in the States, but some of it might be Western culture or language. This is this was my thing when I was back in the States. Is I did also feel like people were more engaging. So Thai people are nice and they're warm. but there's not the engagement. And I mean, I'm curious if it's culture or language. Obviously, they both matter, but I just felt like I was immediately back home getting into deep conversations with strangers.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll bring that up with, and it was partly in my next thing, but I think part of it also is that, I mean, just being foreigners in Thailand, there's already like an 80% less chance that this will happen to us with a Thai person just because of the way we look, and they're intimidated by, a lot of Thais are intimidated talking to a strange foreigner. So before we even start, we're probably not going to experience that.
Right.
So,
yeah, but just connections. Like the way I would think about it is fast connections, just meeting people in bars, and you just connect, and then you're just trading all this information quickly. And like, I never do that with Thai people.
Yes, exactly. And it's really fun. I have fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I've told many people, when I go back, in general, I like it a lot. I mean, not the weather.
Yeah.
but in general, I love going back.
Well, related to that, the next thing I really enjoyed was the banter with waitstaff that I could have, like at restaurants or bars or something. I went out for drinks or meals, and like we went to this restaurant. Nothing changes in Calgary. We went to this restaurant called Earl's, and Earl's is well known for having like tall, stunningly beautiful hostesses and waitresses.
Gotcha.
Like it's an old cliche that all of the modeling agents go there to scout their next model.
Gotcha.
And so I walked in, and there's this like gorgeous Viking woman standing there, like, "Hey, how you doing? Are you here to see friends, or do you want a table?" And I was like, but I can not flirt, but I can talk and chat and joke, and they joke with me, and it's back and forth. I can be a little playful and funny, and they're playful and funny back, and you just don't get that here. You miss that sort of that component of the social part of going out to a meal.
It's our damn fault, dude. Like, we've said it too many times.
It's
our damn fault. But you're right. Even if our Thai was perfect, the bottom line is people would still interact with us differently because they would see, maybe they wouldn't even talk to us. So even if we mastered Thai, we can't escape our race, Greg.
Well, I was out to Earl's, and I was like, so yeah. And this girl came up. She's like, "Hi, I'm Amanda. I'll be your server tonight." And I was like, "Amanda, that's my name." And she's like, "It is, hey? What's your last name?" And I was like, "Oh, it's not the same as yours." And we were immediately off on this thing.
Yeah.
So, but if I did that to like, "Sawadee ka, pom chu."
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, tik chu dui," or whatever, like she'd be like,
No, yeah, right. No, the speed. It's like the speed really matters. Like when it's your native language and it's just, everything happens so fast. That's like a key. That's a key to the experience, that it is so fast and effortless.
Right. That was really refreshing. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, you're right. It's our fault. We got to learn Thai, if not for at least so we can banter with waitstaff.
For sure.
The next thing I noticed was something that this is what I chalk it up to, although there's probably some extenuating circumstances. But I went out for a walk, just a nice morning walk with my buddy, and it was cold. It was about -5. And the area of Calgary that he lives in is quite hilly. So we were walking up some hills, not like mountains, but they were, sizable hills that go over the neighborhood. And I was out of breath.
Oh, really?
Like unusually out of breath. Now I'm fat and I'm kind of out of shape. So that might have been working against
old.
me.
And I'm old.
But dude, like I do 50-kilometer bike rides in Bangkok. I go for 10K walks here. I'm not like a total couch potato. And I should not have been that tired. And then it hit me. I'll bet you it's because of Calgary's altitude.
Oh, really? Calgary is up there.
Calgary is 1,045 meters or 3,428 feet.
Wow. So it's not at sea level.
No, Bangkok is at sea level. Calgary is the 4th highest big city in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And like Denver is like 5,200 feet. So it's higher than Calgary, but Calgary is up there, man.
Wow. I'm sure that's the kind of thing that you wouldn't even be consciously aware of, but then it's building up over day after day after day. Because I think Bangkok is like under sea level. It's like we're like at -2 or whatever,
Yeah. And then it's going down. Next year will be -2.5.
Right.
But I said that to my friend, my buddy Brendan, whose house I was staying at. I was like, "Man, I'm out of breath." And I said, "I wonder if it's the altitude." And he's like, "Or you're just old and fat." Same thing you said. So I was like, "Yeah, well, that doesn't help, but still, this altitude has got to be playing some part to it."
I think you're right.
Yeah, so I wasn't ready for that. And the last thing I noticed, man, Thailand just kills it on the malls. because
Wait, you thought Canadian malls were worse than Thai malls?
they are horrible, dude. They're like prison hallways with little kiosks on the side. And sometimes the kiosks can be big, and sometimes they put a little bit of flair into their design. I'll put some pictures out here for our patrons and things, but man, it's just like a featureless tiled hallway with fluorescent lights, and that's it. There's,
Wow.
it sounds weird to say like I miss the malls, but for places that are easy to go, congregate, hang out, shop, be entertained, Canadian malls offer nothing. They're just dull, drab constructions.
This is fascinating because I feel like the U.S. and Canada, it's kind of like post-mall society because, all the malls in the West are dying because of Amazon and all the online stuff, right? So everyone understands that malls are not cool anymore. But I didn't know that the ones that are still open are so lame. So it's almost like Thailand is, even though Thailand is 20 or 30 years behind, it's like they can crush it because the malls are, for considering what they are, it's not a bad way to spend an afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're almost destinations here. They're that nice and they're welcoming, and they, you say what you will about there's too many malls, but at least they're nice and they put a lot of thought into it. And they have air
conditioning.
Yeah, they put a lot of thought into how they're laid out.
But it's like malls in the U.S. and Canada in the 80s. They were like new and swanky and cool.
Right.
Like it was cool to go to the mall.
Yeah. I remember I was cool going to the mall in the 80s. But man, it's just the picture I took, it looks like a really nice prison hallway.
That's great.
It's just so sad.
That's funny.
I feel weird saying like, Canada doesn't do malls properly, but they are a big part of life in Bangkok.
Sure. I guess malls really are dead in the West. That confirms it. That's the nail in the coffin.
That's right. That's it. That's the final one, because that's like, I was going to go back maybe, but then the malls clinched it. Not going back.
That's right.
But I will say, before I went, I was very skeptical that I would ever go back again. But this trip, I did have a really nice time. And I'm maybe being a bit harsh on Calgary. It's a beautiful city in the summertime. It's got lots of trees. I noticed, they're all dead now, but I was noticed driving down, almost every road is lined with lots of trees.
Well, dude, you posted one picture with like the mountains in the background, and it looks fake. It looks photoshopped, like beautiful mountains in the background.
We did get up to Canmore, a little town called Canmore that's about an hour outside of Calgary, and you're right at the foot of these massive Rocky Mountains, and I'll post that to our patrons as well. But it's, and again, that it does remind you that the majestic nature that you have such easy access to. So
no doubt, for sure.
There's a lot that I am not playing up that I probably should, and I may be giving Calgary a bit of a hard go of it, but we're coming out of a pandemic. The weather was crappy and cold. So it's a much more enjoyable city in the summer, but just the fact that for 4 or 5 months of the year it's like this is a big knock against it.
We have undoubtedly been weakened by our time living in the tropics.
Exactly. That being said, I did open up my air quality app, and the AQI in Bangkok was like 152 that day. And then in Calgary it was like 20. So
I'm sure.
Anyway, that's my thoughts. It was a great trip. Many thanks to any of my friends who are listening. Carl, Brendan, a few other people that sometimes tune in. It was great to see you and hang out, and I really enjoyed it. But I'm in Bangkok, man. It's my home, and I don't think I'll be going back, at least not to Calgary. I don't think I can go back.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some Love, Loathe, or Live With, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. So last time I asked Ed what he thought about Jing-Joke lizards in the kitchen. So this week, Ed, it's all you.
All right, dude. I just got back from a couple of days in Pattaya, or at least a week ago during Songkran. Uh-huh. And it had been a while since I'd been to the Thai beach. And one of the first things I did when I got there, I got there at about 4:45 p.m. So there wasn't much sun left. So I immediately went to the beach, took my shoes off, watched along the beach, sat down in a chair, and what followed. So my question to you is, when you're sitting on the beach, invariably multiple vendors will come up to you selling you all kinds of stuff. Now, they are selling you stuff, you might want what they have. Like, what's your take when you're sitting there and you get the coconut water seller, like the massage lady, someone selling beer, you name it. Like, they got seafood, shrimp, whatever.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where like the parts are greater than the whole. Like, if they could get together like in a union or something and say, all right, we're only going to allow one person to walk down the beach every 10 minutes. I'd probably be okay with that. But now they're like, okay, we're going to have one person 10 feet behind the other one all the time throughout the day constantly. And it's like, it just becomes overkill. And I soon lose all interest in even contemplating dealing with anyone who's selling me something.
Right. Even stuff that you want. You're like, no, I don't want that anymore.
That's right. Exactly. Like, no, I've said no 100 times in the past hour. Get the hell out of here. Leave me alone.
Right. Yeah. So I think a lot of our listeners will have heard of this one before, or obviously experienced it themselves. But for those of you out there who've never been to Thailand, it's an unfortunate aspect of being a foreigner on the beach is you tend to get peppered with all kinds of products. And it's not necessarily that the products are bad. It's just that it is every like minute. So you're trying to relax and drink a beer or like talk to your friend.
Songkran. You want a tattoo? You want some shrimp? You want some chicken? You want a beach ball? You want a you want a sarong? You want a towel? You want a hat? You want a dolphin to blow up and play in the ocean with your kid? Oh, here comes the shrimp guy again. Hey, are you hungry yet? You sure you don't want some shrimp?
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. Yeah. So I mean, to me, it's a loathe. I mean, I'm not going to leave the country, but it is on the list of it's for me, I still think the absolute worst thing about Thailand is taxi drivers that won't take you where you want to go. To me, that's number one. But this is on the list. Like the I don't know what the right word is. Like it's almost like it's like pestering. It's like the constant desire from vendors, even though you can always say no. Like they're just trying to make money. So that's what makes it even more frustrating because they're not like bad people doing something bad. They're just trying to make a living. Then they have a big smile on their face.
Yeah, I get that. I get it. But I think, man, in this case, like less is more. And I've never done a love, loathe, or live with where I would swing so hard from loathe, which I am at, into like if they just managed the the flow.
They should have a rule, right? They should have a rule like one vendor every 10 minutes instead of just constant, because you can't
every 1 minute. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. There's just no way to relax. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm a loathe on that, but they could easily change it if they just went with the less is more maxim.
Interesting. Well, I'm a loathe as well.
Nice.
So as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to David Comerford for lending us his support at the show shout-out level. Greg, what did you find out about David?
Well, our pal David he doesn't say much yet. I wrote him a letter and he wrote back a very nice reply, but he didn't give me a lot of details to go on here for our old show shout-out. But he did say this. He says, I live in Oregon, USA. You've heard of that state?
I have.
Yeah. And he says, I enjoy hiking. And he said, how about you guys do a show on hiking in Thailand?
Ooh. I like this idea. I've done some hiking here, but I'm far from being an expert. And I don't know much about it. Like, I'm presumably there is a hiking subculture here, I guess.
I guess so. I wrote him back and I said, yeah, that's a good idea, but I know nothing about it. Now, hiking in Oregon would be similar to probably hiking in BC, where I spent my childhood in Canada, which is, like the crisp mountain air, the beautiful scenery, the well-groomed trails, I imagine, and things like that. I don't know. Does Thailand have any of those things? I mean, right away, you're hiking in Thailand, and even if it's cool, you're still going to be sweating your bag off. Yeah,
no, it's a different game. I have hiked in Khao Yai, and I've also hiked in Isan, and there were trails, but they're not marked very well, and there's not a lot of support. Like my big worry, and this is why we need to get someone with experience, my big worry would be, getting lost, and then it's not like there's someone coming to rescue you here. In the States, freaking...
Sylvester Stallone would be there with a helicopter, climbing up a cliff to get you.
That's right. Yeah, but I don't think you're getting rescued if you're getting lost in Thailand.
I don't know. I think the park service in Thailand does a pretty good job. I mean, I've heard stories of friends who are camping and they've got really good guides and they know all the camping sites and stuff.
Well, okay, I don't know much about it. Let's get someone who does.
Yeah, well, I mean, David hikes a lot in Oregon. Maybe when he comes here for a visit or something, he can be our, like I said, he can be our hiking correspondent, and he can head off into. We can give him our recorder. He can head off into the mountains with a Zoom H5, and
I'm down. I'm
Yeah.
down.
what would you be? I mean, if you're hiking in Oregon, what would you be scared of? Bears, cougars?
I would say that's probably the two things: bears and mountain lions.
What
and,
would you be scared of
And drunk Americans. Those would be the three
We're
things.
kind of worried about those anywhere, really. But
Right.
what would you be worried about in Thailand? I guess tigers.
No, I think I'd be
Elephants?
worried about just the heat in general, and maybe mosquitoes and malaria. I mean, I've done some hiking, and you're in the jungle. In the States, we don't really use the word jungle. We call it forest, I guess, because we're not tropical.
Yeah.
And I guess in some ways, maybe there's not that much difference. But I feel like over here, it's just more humid, and there's more bugs. And
Yeah.
when I hiked in Khao Yai, which is Thailand's biggest national park, we had to wear these weird slipper things because there were leeches.
Oh, right.
And I don't remember ever doing that in the States. Like I've hiked in the States and followed trails, and they didn't make us put our feet in bags,
Unless you're in Florida or something, but yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and of course, maybe if David comes here and he does work on the hiking beat for the Bangkok podcast, maybe he can finally answer the ultimate question: what is the difference between hiking and trekking?
That is a good question. I have no
I
idea.
don't know. You don't go to Thailand to hike. You go to trek. You
Apparently,
don't
I
go to Oregon
can.
to trek. You go to hike. I don't know. So thanks for that, David. Let us know when you're in town, and maybe we'll go for a hike down to the 7-Eleven or something and
For sure.
sort it out.
All right. A final thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
True that. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. Send us a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take it easy out there, and we will hopefully see you in Thailand. I'll see you back here next week.
No doubt.
Oh, speaking of which, that meant I went to get my son from school today, and I came home and there was a little bird in our living room, like one of those little ones that fly around all over the place,
In your room?
in the living room. And we're like, how the hell did it get in? And we looked, and the kitchen door was open about 4 inches.
Oh, really?
And then the kitchen leads to a balcony outside, and that door was open about 4 inches. This bird had a vendetta. I'm telling you, he was after something. Well, I didn't even notice it came in, and Kellen went, "Hey!" And I'm like, "What?" And I looked up, and this thing was like, I thought it was a massive mosquito.
It freaks,
at first or
dude.
something.
It freaks me out. Oh, when birds get in. I mean, it doesn't happen often, like maybe once a year, but
Yeah.
it freaks me out. Like because they know they're trapped and they start flapping. It freaks me out.
And my son was like, "Oh, let's keep him in. Let's catch him and like pet him or something." And I was like, "No. Birds are full of bugs and they crap all over the place. They're gross. Let's get it out of here."
Yeah. Right.
So we just opened the door and out it went.